Good afternoon, everyone. Carolina Weather Authority meteorologist Joshua Nagelberg with a look at the tropics and our local weather here in the Carolinas. And if you could do me a favor, show your support and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We also have a link to our Facebook page, our Twitter account, and our home page. And the latest article we've talked about is the tropics here with some potential tropical trouble that Mike put out yesterday. And I'm going to talk, of course, a lot about that. We also have a new tropical storm, Epsilon, which should not be a surprise to anybody who's watched my videos over the past week. But that looks like it's going to be a threat to Bermuda, and I'm going to focus a lot of my time talking about that, but also talk about potential threats to the United States, Central America, and the Caribbean. So here is our list of our latest storms, and we now have Epsilon in the books as our 26th named storm, just too shy of the record from 2005, and our next one on the list will be Zeta, and then Eta, and Theta. I love how those all rhyme, don't you guys? We had Beta already, so we don't want to have another one of those. But we certainly still have the potential for at least one of these to become a hurricane, and we think Epsilon certainly has a good shot of that occurring, and maybe even another major hurricane before the season is over. If you saw my video from the weekend, you did notice that I talked about how the active pattern we're in now is going to continue into November, which is not unusual for 2020. It's a little unusual for this time of the year to have these storms still popping up fairly late in the season, but we've seen it happen before, and that's definitely something that we're going to be watching for you all closely. So we've started to see now, we've been watching this area here over the Western Caribbean, which hasn't really even formed yet. And now it looks like maybe two separate pieces are going to form rather than one large consolidated area, which I guess is some pretty good news for those of you in Florida and on the East Coast who we've been watching over the past several model runs, maybe a particularly major storm coming up the East Coast. That's not to say it still can't happen, but the models have kind of backed off of that and are now showing kind of two separate pieces splitting up. The first one we'll talk about here does not look like it's going to be a major storm, but certainly could be a lower end tropical depression or storm. And that moisture is spreading across Florida and will be moving up into the central Gulf Coast states. I am not expecting this to become a hurricane, but I would not be shocked if we had a tropical storm Zeta out of it. Now, a second piece is likely to form behind it. And earlier, the GFS model and to some extent the European were showing these two forming into a larger gyre. That's looking a little bit less likely. So we're definitely not out of the woods in Florida or Cuba or in the Yucatan, including Belize, Honduras, Guatemala, Jamaica, certainly not out of the woods, or the Caymans. But what we may see is kind of a first precursor system come up and be on the weak side, and then maybe a little bit later on in the month or even towards the beginning of November, maybe a more intense system if we can get the stars to align. So we're not completely ruling this out, but it's looking a little bit more muddy than we'd like to say. And I'll be honest with you guys, and maybe I jumped a little bit fast with this, but I think a lot of folks did as well based on all the consistency that we've seen with many of the ensembles in the GFS, is that it looked like a pretty good sized storm was going to come up here, and wanted to let everybody know about that. But now, since there's been some backing off of that idea, we're not going to tuck our tail and say it's not going to happen, but maybe we've got a little more time to watch. That's kind of where I want to go with this. So we still likely will have a few more storms towards November, affecting even the Eastern Caribbean and then potentially coming up toward Bermuda or even over the Bahamas. And certainly in Central America, this time of the year can be very busy, and I want you guys to certainly be on guard over the next few weeks. This is Bermuda circled in the red. Bermuda, if you remember, was hit by Hurricane... Oh goodness, we've had so many. Hurricane Paulette back in the end of August, and the eye went right over the island, caused some damage. Maybe not their worst hurricane, but then we had a threat coming later on from Teddy, which avoided to the east. Now we've got another storm, Epsilon, which has formed this morning, and that likely is going to get within 100 miles of the island and maybe could go right over it. So we could have potentially our second hurricane hit on Bermuda within just a month and a half, which is not completely unheard of, but this would be still fairly rare for Bermuda and very unlucky. So I'm going to talk a lot about Epsilon as well. All right, so here is a look at our global heat content. Let me, I don't know why it loads July 1st. Let me show you October, and you'll see that still we have a lot of potential heat in the environment for tropical systems to develop. Less over the Western and Central Gulf than before, but quite a bit in the Western Caribbean, and also over the east coast of Florida and over the Bahamas, and over the central parts of America. In fact, over the last couple of days, you've seen the heat potential actually started to build off of the Carolina coast and Georgia coast. So if something were to track this direction, it could certainly still hold intact and could even be a hurricane. And even up around Bermuda, we still have potential in the waters. It's still pretty warm, and all we need is a low shear, and I think that's what we're going to have over the next couple of days. I'll also show you guys the Madden-Julian oscillation. When the colors get into the blues, that means more favorable rising air for storms, and that phase shifts over the Caribbean and over the southern Gulf as we head towards the end of October and early November, and shifts east as well. So waves coming off of Africa could still hold together. It just right now isn't looking favorable for that to happen, but give it about 10 or 14 days and that certainly does change. So I want to let you guys know let you be aware that we're in for another potentially busy stretch of a few storms in here, hence the graphic I just showed you all. Also, we'll look at the 200 millibar sinking versus rising. The sinking air is here and the rising air is in here. So, of course, the greens lead to more favorable conditions for storms coming across, and that'll be the case at the very beginning of November. Wind shear right now is fairly low down here in the southwestern Caribbean, but a lot higher across the Gulf of Mexico. And right over here where Epsilon is formed is fairly low as well, and that's why our storm has gotten together so well there. As we move on to the next couple of days, this wind shear will lessen and push northward and away from Bermuda into the northern Atlantic, and we'll have lower wind shear here, so Epsilon should develop into a hurricane probably towards the end of the week or by the weekend. Down in here, though, we still have potentially two competing systems, one of which will go into the Gulf where conditions are not very favorable, or could track west towards the Yucatan. Either way, it's a lot of rain for Cuba, Florida, maybe the Western Bahamas, Jamaica, the Caymans, as well as Honduras, Nicaragua, and southeast Guatemala. So flooding rains certainly look possible. Same goes for Western Colombia and Panama as well. Our climate forecast system from Tropical Tidbits shows this wind shear, and anomalies in the brighter colors mean more shear than typical across that area, whereas blues are certainly less wind shear than average. But notice a trend, certainly to go with the Madden-Julian oscillation, shows that lowering wind shear, and it looks favorable in the Caribbean as we get into the beginning of November for more storms. Here is Epsilon, and I will point your attention real quick as well to this area. Over the last couple of days, models have been showing potential development in here. Now we've got something else up in the northwest Caribbean. So the models have just really stunk, to be honest with you guys. And maybe I'm at fault for kind of jumping on them. But in this case, certainly we've not seen what we like to see as meteorologists, and that's agreement. But this is the area we're watching now, just a 10% chance of development as it tracks up into here, and that moisture gets strewn northward toward the central and eastern Gulf states, maybe up the southeast coast. But Epsilon is really the storm that, not in the U.S., but in Bermuda, we need to be concerned with. Here's the track, and showing a hurricane coming just east of Bermuda during the day on Friday, and then turning northward, and not a threat to the United States or even Canada. It's going to be pulling away to the northeast. But we have to watch and see how it forms and tracks over the next couple of days. Here is the tropical loop overall, and we see here is this disorganized wave here. All the thunderstorms are off to the east. Here's the area we're going to watch later on in the week and into next week off of Panama, Costa Rica, and to the south of Jamaica, but not organizing at this point. And then here's another wave which will take at least a week to get into a more favorable environment to form. But the most favorable environment right now is over the central Atlantic, away from any land, except for this little island of Bermuda here. And that's what we're going to be watching. As we zoom in, Bermuda's off the map. It's up in here. But this system has now wrapped enough thunderstorm activity to be classified a tropical storm, and should continue to develop gradually over the next couple of days. Guidance takes most of the model guidance takes the storm very close to Bermuda, which is hiding under all of these potential spaghetti plots, and then to turn off to the right. And actually, it could be stronger away from Bermuda over this part of the Atlantic based on lower wind shear. Here's also, this is Bermuda, and this is the ensemble forecast system. You can see some much more intense plots. In fact, every model has it as a hurricane, or every ensemble has it as a hurricane up over the northern Atlantic. And you can see a pretty good agreement that it's strengthening over the next few days and becoming a hurricane towards the end of the week or weekend. Maybe even a Category 2, possibly taking a run at Category 3 briefly Sunday and Monday of next week. Here's the H-Wharf, and this is Bermuda right here, and I'm going to show you where the center of this storm goes. The hurricane track is east of Bermuda, but the H-Wharf model is actually much closer than Comfort for Bermuda. In fact, here's the eye coming up on Bermuda and the northern eye wall going over the island early Friday morning around 5 a.m. Bermuda time. and then tracking away from Bermuda Friday evening, but a very close hit, maybe even a direct hit to Bermuda according to the HWRF as a low-end Category 1 hurricane, and then as it pulls away, it strengthens more as the pressures could drop into the 970s and even 960s up in here. This will kick up the surf off the East Coast, so if you're planning on going to the beaches, even though it's gotten cooler, anywhere from the Outer Banks up, expect some rip currents and dangerous surf. We'll take a look at the ensemble members here from the Global Ensemble Forecast System real fast, and I will show you all. We are not seeing a whole lot of agreement away from Epsilon over here, over the Caribbean. We've got solutions trying to show development, really not much in here, but more development towards the end of the week and over the weekend near Cuba, with one solution going up across Florida and the southeast, others kind of buried in the southern Gulf. I don't think this is an issue for Louisiana, although we do have one model run that shows a weaker storm coming through there. So maybe some rain coming that way, but certainly not a major hurricane. But the Caribbean looks awfully busy here on November 1st in about a little over, not even quite 2 weeks from now. So we definitely have more to watch down there, but the general steering currents are northeast. So I think the Western Gulf is probably shut down. We still could have some moisture coming up in the central and eastern Gulf of Mexico. And what I will show you real fast, as we look at the European ensembles here real fast, Europeans got kind of one system here and one down here potentially forming this week. Of course, this is Epsilon and moving away. But here we have a few solutions either going into Central America or a weaker system coming up to the Central Gulf or something coming up through Cuba towards Florida. So again, we agree to disagree, and that's the point I want to make with you guys. Finally, we'll take a look at ensemble precipitation. You can see all this moisture coming up into the eastern Gulf states over Cuba and across Central America. So it's going to be plenty wet over the next couple of days. Had this loaded and apologize it didn't go out as far as I'd like. But this is the 0Z run, shows a lot of rain over the Florida Keys, over western Cuba, over Belize, over Honduras. It's just going to be a very wet pattern right on into the beginning of November. So typically South Florida gets into the dry season around now. The point I want to make to you guys is that we are definitely not done with tropical rains in South Florida. So if you're in Miami or in the Keys or even on the Panhandle, unfortunately this season is going to continue to carry on longer for us. And those are the points that I want to make with you guys. Finally, we'll look at the GFS. And you'll see lowering pressures over here, but not the kind of lowering pressures that would form into a storm. Once Epsilon gets out of the way, we may finally see development. But right now, it's backed off quite a bit. I will tell you that here's some development possible towards the beginning of November. Maybe something to watch for the Dominican Republic and Puerto Rico, but a lot could still change. Where this high is pointed, though, it does shut things down over the Western Gulf. So anything would be Eastern Gulf or Western and Central Caribbean. I will show you, though, the parallel GFS, which sometimes gets a little crazy with these things, but let me show you the 6Z model because the 12 is not really fully in. Shows Epsilon becoming a formidable hurricane and then moving away east of Newfoundland next weekend. And then you can see in the Western Caribbean some lower pressure. And finally, maybe something forms off the Florida Panhandle next week, and that could come up the East Coast. So we still could see a lot of rain, but the threat right now of a major hurricane swiping the entire East Coast at least has lowered for the time being. We'll have to keep an eye on what comes through the Caribbean, though, next week and into the following weekend, because this could certainly change quite a bit. Right now, this is east of Bermuda, and we have a big high moving in, but notice there's yet more development south of Jamaica that we're going to have to watch. So the Caribbean is going to be awfully hot and awfully active for at least a few more weeks. Same goes for the Central Atlantic, and then in the Gulf and near Florida, it's just one big question mark at this point. We still see that potential, so I'm not going to write it off right now, but the trends today have been a little more favorable for us, and let's hope that it stays that way. We really don't need any more storms across the United States. All right, folks, well, thanks for joining me. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and y'all have a wonderful, blessed day. God bless.